morning. Well, this week we are starting our second week of our sermon series, The Story. And the story is us walking through or journeying through the Bible. And we're using the avenue of a book called The Story, in which the authors have taken the Bible, which can sometimes be confusing and really out of order. They put it in chronological order, and so that these small stories that a lot of us have learned in Sunday school and throughout church, these small stories come together to form this big story, and it kind of makes sense. And we see this big story of who God is, and we see our story of the people in the Bible and how they interacted with God and what these two come together. Last week we started in the beginning. We started in the beginning when God created the heavens and the earth. And we learned about creation. God created everything. Everything we see and who we are. God was passionate about his creation, so much so that we find God walking through the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, wanting to be with God's creation, spending time with God's creation. But Adam and Eve, we as humans had different plans. We chose sin. They chose to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and brought sin into human nature. And God can't be a part of sin. And so we learned that ever since then, though, from this very beginning, that God is on a pursuit to win us back to God. I love the fall. Not the fall of man, the fall season. The change in the colors. Now it actually feels like fall, so it's that sweatshirt weather, those cool, crisp mornings. Football season kicks off, which is exciting. If you're a football fan, I like football. Hot chocolate, warm apple cider. Fall is a great time of year. And one of the joys of fall is that, especially if you like to watch TV, is that all the new shows come back. All the shows you watched before come back and they start their season premieres. And then you have these new shows, right? These pilots, these new shows that the networks are trying to lure you into to watch every single week and give up some of your family time and some of your time to watch. And so pretty exciting. Some of them are pretty creative. And so you have these new pilots, right? So imagine yourself in Hollywood, working for one of these networks, if you can imagine that. Some of you might be pretty foreign to you at that point, but imagine yourself in Hollywood. You're picking a cast for a new pilot, right? This new series is a spellbinding story of a clan that builds a powerful, world-impacting family tree. This is a pilot, and obviously it's crucial to make the right choice of who you pick for the leading characters, right, of this Kennedy-like family of influence and fame. And so as you wait to find out who is cast for this awesome pilot, this new series coming out, you expect really this vibrant young couple with gleaming white teeth, tan-toned bodies. But before you stands a 75-year-old man and a 65-year-old woman. Not what you really pictured as a start of a great new series, like the start of a new nation, right? No one would pick a 75-year-old man and a 65-year-old woman to start this new family tree that will influence the world. But God chooses Abram and Sarah at that point to launch a new nation to impact the entire world. He would say in Genesis 12:1, he would say, a nation through whom all nations of the earth would be blessed. So as Abram and Sarah stand there, dusty old robes, crowned in wispy white hair, loosely fitting skin, probably befuddled as anyone else, that God chose them. A very unlikely pair, and even more unlikely is that he starts with a woman who is barren, who can't produce any children to start this new nation, right? And to complicate things even worse, it takes 25 years for her to even have a kid in order to start this new nation. By this time, Abram will be 100 years old, Sarah will be 90 years old. Their names will be changed to Abraham and Sarah. But they're pretty old. Perhaps their Social Security checks can help decorate the tent for the baby. And they can take naps when the baby takes naps. But God picks people that we wouldn't necessarily select to take part in His story. And in fact, sometimes, and most times, we're pretty shocked by the lead characters in God's story. It's not because of their abilities that God chooses them. It's because of their availability and their willingness to let God's purposes come through. The important thing is God chooses these unlikely characters so that people will know that it is because of God that these things are happening. As we see here this morning, we would never imagine that anyone but God would start a nation from a 75-year-old man and a 65-year-old woman. It has to be because of God that these things have happened. The good news is that God does choose unlikely characters. And so He could be choosing you, an unlikely character. He does choose us, unlikely characters. So let's take a look at these characters, Abram and Sarah. They're from a place called just U-R, pretty easy. This is the place where the Tower of Babel was built, if you recognize that story from Sunday school, from your reading at home. But the Tower of Babel was being built by many nations, and then God scattered all the nations, gave them different languages, and there's this area of the world that God was going to build this new nation through Abram and Sarah. Okay, so God chose, like I said, Abram and Sarah at a pretty old age. And at this time, when he did chose them, they weren't believers in essentially Him as a God. They were, their parents, their grandparents, believed in pagan gods. They worshipped pagan gods, and so they had many gods. So there was a god of harvest, there was a god of fertility, there was a god for this, and there was a god for that. So that was kind of the culture that they kind of came out of. And to worship just one God was unheard of at that time. There was many, many gods that people would worship. And so God came to Abraham, and he commanded him. Then we see this in Genesis 12, 1-4. Now the Lord said to Abram, go away from your country, and your kindred, and your father's house, to the land that I will show you. I will make of you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, so that you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you. And you and your family of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. So God tells Abram, this guy who lived really unknown to him at the time, to get up and leave. Leave all you know. Leave your neighbors. Leave your father's house. This house that you have promised to you. Leave all that and go. And so he goes. Hebrews 11:8, which was also read this morning. By faith, Abram obeyed when he was called to set out for a place that he was to receive in his inheritance. And he set out, not knowing where he was going. So God chose Abraham and Sarah, very unlikely characters. And so that we know when all this happens, when this nation is birthed, and this great nation rises up, that we know it's done by God. And that we can see God in that plan. And the plan is, a fourfold plan, as I just mentioned. God will make a new nation great. God will make Abraham's name great. God will bless all those who bless Abraham and curse those who curse him. And God will bless all the nations. This is the important one. God will bless all the nations of the world through Abraham and the new nation. God will use the new nation to reveal his heart and his plan to win us back. Last week we talked about how God, ever since the fall, ever since sin was introduced, is in a pursuit to gain us back, to win us back. He tried with the flood, but that didn't work. And this is his new plan. To build a nation that will bless the world and to win us back. So he picks Abram and Sarah, and just like any new TV show that you find in a new pilot, there is drama and turbulence. Sarah, she's, of course, like I said, 25 years that she actually has a kid. And so she's getting kind of impatient. And so she decides to start it on her own. And so she offers Hagar, which is her maidservant, to Abraham, and Ishmael is born. Okay, so Sarah's getting a little impatient, says, hey, why don't you take my maidservant and have a kid with her, that way we can get this ball rolling. Right? And so this might seem a little scandalous now, and it would probably make for a good TV show. But back then, it was your name was very important. So to carry on your lineage or your name was one of the most important things. If you didn't have any offspring, you would lose essentially everything. Your inheritance would be broken up. You would lose everything. So a name was very important. So a lot of times, even in marriage contracts, there would be clauses that if the woman was infertile, or that you could divorce her, or you could take on more wives, or have concubines. So this was kind of common practice, even though it's pretty foreign to us now. And so Hagar gets pregnant, and Ishmael is born. And God blesses Ishmael, but does not begin a new nation with Ishmael. If you have to study other religions, the Muslim faith essentially is built off of this story here. Ishmael, they believe, is essentially the lineage to their religion. So they believe that the true son, the true offspring, is Ishmael. And so, if you're interested in world religions, that's kind of something of interest. So Abraham and Sarah, at 190 respectively, finally get the promised child. And Sarah laughs this preposterous kind of word of the Lord that it would happen. And so they have a child named Isaac, which means laughter, because it was so preposterous that she would be having a kid at this late age, which is probably true. God then, once they get this baby, they're obviously very excited. They're in their hundreds, or past 100, I guess. And they finally have a kid. At 25 years after they were promised, so excited. And so then comes kind of a plot twister. God comes to Abraham and says, I want you to sacrifice this son that you've been waiting 25 years for. This time, Isaac, they say, is probably a teenager, around 15 years old. Abraham's about 115, Sarah like 105. Not the optimal years to be raising a teenager, if there is such thing. But they're called to sacrifice this son. And so in Genesis 22, Abraham immediately responds, believing that God would raise his beloved son to life from the dead. And then Isaac is spared. I read this story this morning during the children's sermon. They go up this mountain, this hill called Moriah, and they get ready to offer Isaac as a sacrifice, and a ram is offered instead. Centuries later, another beloved son will be sacrificed that is not spared. In John 3:16, we learn of this sacrifice of this son. And we see again that God will go to all costs to win us back. And you can even see the parallels in language between Genesis 22:2 and John 3:16. Take your son, your only son, whom you love, and sacrifice him. Compared to, for God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son. Abraham was tested and luckily didn't have to give up Isaac to be sacrificed. But God shows the lengths he's willing to go to by sacrificing his own son. It's interesting that as Abraham ascends Mount Moriah to sacrifice Isaac, which most scholars believe that Mount Moriah is most likely in Jerusalem, based on a text in 2 Chronicles. It is on that hill, the same hill, 2,080 years later, that God's one and only son would be sacrificed. And there would be no ram to take the place, but only God, the Father's Son, hanging on a cross for our sins, the ultimate sacrifice. God continually shows us over and again how much he loves us, how much he desires to be with us, the lengths that he goes in order to make that happen. We see this in this story, and as we look at this story, what I want you to take away is that God chose Abraham and Sarah to begin this new nation. And God reveals another pattern. The pattern is that God chooses the unlikely to fulfill his purpose. Ordinary people, like you, like me, to do his purpose. To tell God's great story. To reveal who God is. God chooses me, and he chooses you to tell his story and reflect on his plan to win us